They told her it was suicide. They told her the winds were too strong, the storm too violent, and the lightning too close. No one believed any aircraft could survive that kind of weather. Sarah Cole sat in the medic tent at Fort Hawthorne, listening to the rain hammer against the metal roof. She had been at the base for only 4 months. Most soldiers barely knew her name. To them, she was just another medic, quiet, polite, always ready with a first aid kit. Nobody here knew her past. Nobody knew she had once been a flight medic in another unit, trained to fly into dangerous zones to save lives. She never talked about it. She didn't want attention. But that night, attention came to her. A recon team of 7 Marines had gone dark during a mission near Blackwater Ridge. The last radio call was broken, but one word cut through the static: injured. The storm hit fast, wind howling, rain like sheets of glass. One by one, every rescue helicopter was grounded. Even the best pilots refused to fly. Sarah sat quietly, listening to the arguments in the operations room. "This is madness," Colonel Porter said, his voice heavy. "No one is going up in this storm. We'll have to wait it out." Major Ross added, "By then it'll be too late, but sending anyone now, that's a death sentence." Sarah's heart pounded. She could see the faces of the Marines in her mind. They were probably injured, cold, and waiting for help that might never come. She stood at the back of the room. Her voice was steady. "I'll go." The room went silent. Heads turned. Ross frowned. "You'll go? You're a medic, not a pilot." She took a step forward. "I have flight training. I've done this before." The colonel shook his head. "That storm will tear the bird apart. Even experienced pilots are refusing." She didn't back down. "If no one goes, they'll die. I'm not letting that happen." The room was tense. No one knew her well enough to believe her. To them, she was just a new medic, making a reckless offer. "You're not cleared for this," she insisted. "This isn't your job." She met his eyes. "Saving lives is my job." For a moment, there was only the sound of the storm outside. Then Colonel Porter finally said, "Cole, if you take that chopper, I can't guarantee you'll make it back." She nodded. "Understood." Minutes later, she was walking across the rain-soaked tarmac toward the medevac helicopter. The wind almost knocked her off her feet. She pulled her jacket tighter and kept moving. Inside the hangar, an old UH-860 Blackhawk sat waiting. It wasn't the newest bird on base, but it was reliable. She ran her hands over the controls, familiar, like touching an old friend. As she powered it up, a young mechanic ran over. "Ma'am, you can't take this alone. At least wait for a co-pilot." Sarah looked at him, her expression calm. "No time. 7 men are waiting." The rotors began to spin. The storm roared louder, as if to warn her to turn back. But Sarah wasn't listening. This wasn't about her. It was about the 7 Marines out there in the dark, cold rain, maybe bleeding, maybe praying someone would come. She pulled her helmet on, tightened the straps, and spoke softly to herself. "Hold on, boys. I'm coming." As the helicopter lifted off the ground, the base shrank below her. Lightning lit up the clouds ahead, flashing across the sky like a warning. Most people believed she wouldn't return alive. Sarah Cole believed she didn't have a choice, and with that, she flew straight into the storm. The storm swallowed her whole. One moment, the lights of Fort Hawthorne were behind her. The next, she was in complete darkness. Thick clouds wrapped around the helicopter like a wall. Rain pounded against the windshield so hard she could barely see 10 feet ahead. The controls shook in her hands. The wind slammed into the Blackhawk, pushing it sideways. The warning alarms began to beep. Sarah gripped the stick tighter. She had flown through rough weather before, but nothing like this. Her headset crackled. It was Major Ross's voice from the base. "Cole, turn back now. You can't push through this." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her focus was locked on the instruments, scanning for any sign of the Marine's location. The radar flickered, the screen filled with static. The storm was scrambling her systems. Every second in the air felt longer.
Every second meant the 7 Marines out there were getting colder, weaker. Lightning flashed across the sky, so close she could feel the heat through the glass. Thunder shook the cabin. Her heart pounded, but her hand stayed steady. She whispered under her breath, "Hang on, boys. Just hang on." The helicopter lurched suddenly, dropping several feet in a violent downdraft. Her stomach turned, but she pulled hard, leveling it out. Then something, a faint signal on the emergency frequency. She adjusted the radio. Static, then a broken voice. "Ridge. Injured. Need evac." Her chest tightened. It was them. She quickly entered the coordinates. They were on a ridge near Blackwater Ridge, just as the reports had said. But the location was bad, surrounded by steep cliffs and open to the wind. Landing there would be almost impossible. Still, she pressed forward. Minutes later, she saw it. A faint orange light in the distance, flickering through the storm. A flare. Her eyes burned with relief. They were alive. She guided the Black Hawk toward the ridge. The closer she got, the worse the wind became. The helicopter bucked like a wild animal. Every movement had to be perfect. One mistake, and she'd slam into the rocks. Through the rain, she caught sight of them. 7 figures huddled together, their uniforms soaked, some leaning on each other for support. Even from the air, she could see the injuries. She hovered over them, fighting the wind. The helicopter shook violently. The ridge was narrow, jagged, with almost no space to land. She lowered the bird slowly, inch by inch. Her arms ached from holding the controls steady. The Marines looked up, shielding their eyes from the rotor wash. She could see the disbelief on their faces. Finally, the skids touched the ground, just enough for the Marines to climb in. The first 2 Marines scrambled aboard, helping the injured. One man had a bleeding leg, another's arm was in a makeshift sling. Sarah jumped out of her seat briefly to help pull them inside, her medic training kicking in. "Go, go, go," she shouted over the roar of the storm. One by one, they got in. The last Marine, Sergeant Mike Daniels, stopped at the door and looked at her. "Ma'am, I thought nobody was coming." Sarah gave a small, tight smile. "Buckle up. We're not home yet." All 7 were aboard. She jumped back into the pilot's seat, gripping the controls. The storm slammed against the helicopter again as she pulled up. The ridge dropped away beneath them. They were airborne, but the hardest part was still ahead.
The ridge disappeared behind them, swallowed by the storm. Inside the helicopter, the 7 Marines sat silently. Some held on to their seats with white knuckles. Others closed their eyes, exhausted and injured. The cabin smelled of rain, fuel, and fear. Sarah kept her eyes forward, scanning the instruments. The storm wasn't letting up. It was getting worse. The wind howled louder, slamming into the Black Hawk from the side. The controls jerked in her hands. Every few seconds, lightning lit up the sky, followed by deep rumbles of thunder. Her headset crackled again. Major Ross's voice came through, tense. "Major Cole, do you copy? We've lost you on radar. What's your status?" Sarah spoke calmly, even though her heart was racing. "I've got them. We're heading back." There was a pause, then Ross replied, "You have less than 30 minutes of fuel. Do you understand?" She did, and that wasn't the only problem. Her warning lights were flashing. The tail rotor had taken a hit from the wind. The engine temperature was rising, but she couldn't think about that now, not when she had 7 lives depending on her. She steadied the helicopter, flying low to avoid the worst of the turbulence. The rain battered against the glass, almost blinding her. Behind her, one of the Marines groaned in pain. Corporal Tom Harris had a deep gash in his leg. Blood was pooling fast. Sarah glanced back. "Hang in there," she called over the noise. One hand still on the controls, she reached for her medical kit. Years of combat medic training came back to her like muscle memory. She pulled out a pressure bandage, secured it tightly around his leg, all while keeping the helicopter steady. The Marines stared at her, shocked at how calm she was.
Private Jack Miller whispered to another Marine, "Who is she?" No one had an answer. The storm roared on, the fuel gauge dropped lower. Then it happened. A blinding flash of lightning lit up the sky and struck the tail of the helicopter. The cabin shook violently, warning alarms screamed, the smell of burning metal filled the air. Sarah's hands moved fast. "Hold on," she shouted. The helicopter dropped sharply before she regained control, leveling it out. Her pulse was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. "We're okay. We're still flying." She wasn't sure if she was telling them that, or herself. Minutes felt like hours as she pushed forward. The base had to be close now. She just needed to keep the bird in the air a little longer. Finally, through the rain and darkness, she saw it. The faint glow of the landing lights at Fort Hawthorne. Her chest tightened with relief, but she didn't relax, not yet. The final approach was the most dangerous. The storm was still raging, and the runway was slick with rain. One wrong move and they'd crash before making it down. She lowered the helicopter carefully, fighting the wind all the way. The Marines gripped their seats, silent. The skids touched the wet tarmac. The helicopter slid slightly, then steadied. They were down. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the rain pounding against the metal. Then Sergeant Daniels unbuckled, his voice low but full of emotion. "Ma'am, I thought I'd never see my wife again." Sarah looked at him, her voice quiet. "Go see her. You're all going home." The Marines climbed out, some limping, some helping each other. Outside, Colonel Porter and Major Ross stood waiting, rain soaking their uniforms. Both men stared at Sarah in disbelief as she stepped out of the cockpit. Porter shook his head. "Cole, how did you—" Sarah just gave a small smile. "They needed me." She walked past them, rain dripping from her hair, her boots splashing in the puddles. She didn't stay for praise. She didn't need it. The Marines were alive. That was enough. And that night, in the middle of the worst storm the base had ever seen, Sarah Cole quietly became a legend.
If you were touched by this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us in sharing good stories that matter. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.